The collect for the first Sunday after Easter. Almighty Father, who hast given thine only Son to die for our sins and to rise again for our justification, grant us so to put away the leaven of malice and wickedness, that we may always serve thee in pureness of living, through the merits of the same, thy Son, Jesus Christ. Verse 1 of Epiphany Hymn 127. Earth has many a noble city. Bethlehem, thou dost all excel. Out of thee the Lord of heaven came to rule Israel. We turn our attention to looking at Dr. Hengstenberg's corpus, I guess, of volumes of prodigious, laborious man who's had descent of the liberals, that's a bad word, the impious, maybe a better way to put it. That's what he would have said, that they were lacking in reverence and respect, and brought that to their. This is from the Harvard College Library, 1868, a bequest. So not very long after it was published. I forget when he died. Well, let's see if we can get this a little bigger here. Maybe not. The recent interest in the subject of Egyptian antiquities began with the publication of the works Champollion the Younger, about 20 years ago, since his death, which occurred in 1832. These researches have been prosecuted with much zeal by his scholars and other distinguished archaeologists. Two of the learned men of Holland, Professors Ruvens and Leemans, have made important contributions to this subject, derived in part from the treasures of the Leiden Museum. The results of the labors of Rossellini, professor of Oriental languages and antiquities, are of highest value. In 1829, he and his brother accompanied Champollion in scientific expedition to Egypt, which was taken under the joint auspices of the governments of France and Tuscany. Champollion, before his death, committed to him the honorable office of bringing before the world the result of their associated labors and studies. And then I suspect later on we'll be told how magnificent their minds are in this modern critical period. Hubris. We'll see. It consists of a series of treatises which embrace the most important results of the investigation of history and civil institutions of the ancient pharaoh dynasties under the pagan Greek and Roman dominion. The contents of the work are as rich as the plan is comprehensive. It abounds in researches relating to the languages, civil history, and history of arts in the Valley of Nile. Rossellini published in Rome in 1837. I don't know if I can make that bigger or not. There we go. In this interesting field of research, several Englishmen have acquired high distinction. Among these are Dr. Young, Major Felix, Lord Prudhoe, and Sir Gardner Wilson. Dr. Young shares with Champollion the honor of having first indicated the right method of deciphering the hieroglyphical language. To Mr. Wilkinson justly belongs the encomium which he has himself bestowed on Rossini. He is a man of erudition and a gentleman, and one whose enthusiastic endeavors, stimulated by great perseverance, are tempered by judgment and that modesty which is the characteristic of real merit. Yeah, that's true. I like that. Mr. Wilkinson's principal works on Egypt are now contained in 9 volumes. A general view of Egypt and topography of Thebes. Manners and customs of ancient Egyptians, including their private life government, laws, arts, manufacture, religion, and early history. They everywhere exhibit that caution, sound judgment, modesty, and enthusiasm which greatly delight the reader. At the same time, the arrangement is susceptible of improvement, while the style is somewhat heavy and wanting in precision and scholar-like fashion. Another distinguished investigator in these studies is Dr. Leipsius, a native of Naumburg in Prussia. He published in 1834 a prize dissertation entitled Paläographie als Mittel für die Sprachforschung. His studies led him to Turin and then to Rome, where he was appointed one of two corresponding secretaries to the Archaeological Institute there. These researches derive special importance from the light they cast upon the Old Testament records, especially upon the Mosaic history. An incidental, undesigned, but most valuable proof is thus drawn from witnesses that cannot lie in favor and the trustworthiness of those records. Paintings, numerous and beautiful beyond conception, as fresh and perfect as if only finished yesterday, exhibit before our eyes the truth of what the Hebrew lawgiver. Let's see if I can track down all of Albright's works. Wrote almost 5,000 years ago. 5,000. The authenticity of the documents of our faith thus rests not on manuscripts and records alone, but the hardest and most enduring substance and nature have added their unsuspecting testimony. Egyptian history and manners of the ancient nations, Mr. Wilkinson's remark, cannot be but interesting to everyone, and so intimately connected are they with the scriptural accounts of the Israelites and the events of the succeeding ages relative to Judea, that the name of Egypt need only be mentioned to recall the early impressions we have received from the study of the Bible. It is the object of the present volume to collect and apply the results obtained by these and numerous other authors as far as they relate to the Book of Moses. This had not been done before the appearance of this work in 1840. Even the most recent German commentators are sadly deficient in this respect. They've scarcely made any advance upon the works of Spencer and Leclerc, who wrote more than a century ago. Some of the other works of the author of this volume, Dr. E.W. Hengstenberg, are too well known in this country to render a statement of the general qualifications for the work which he has here undertaken. It may be, however, be proper to say that he has made the Pentateuch a special subject of study. Probably no one in Germany or elsewhere has devoted more attention to that interesting but too much neglected portion of the sacred volume. His situation as professor of Berlin also gave him access to the rich collection of Egyptian antiquities in the Berlin Museum, and the reader is left to judge whether he has not made good use of his advantages. The form of the work has somewhat been changed in translation. Okay, translational stuff. Newton Theological Seminary, Andover, 1843. Addendum by the English editor. Okay, let's see what he's got to say. Everybody's got to get their opinion, and I'd like to get Dr. Hengstenberg. A new field of biblical criticism has been opened by the recent discoveries in the tombs and temples of Egypt, the memorials of their manners, customs, and institutions which the people of the pharaohs depicted on the walls of their sepulchres afford a decisive, because unsuspicious, test of the historical veracity of the Old Testament, and they have furnished confirmations of its minute accuracy. Don't tell Wellhausen this, which must silence where they do not convince the more skeptical. the deviant dissectionists, and then boys and girls come along through seminaries and they don't know what to do with this. Overthrow the rash theory of Bolin that the sacred books of the Jews were written at a period posterior to the Babylonian captivity. It is to be regretted that while exposing the groundless theories of others, he should himself have shown some tendency to adopt a scarcely less dangerous error by throwing doubts on the originality and consequently on the inspired character of the Mosaic legislation. In republishing his work in England, the editor has deemed it advisable to examine the nature of the doubts which Dr. Hengstenberg raised and take advantage of the most recent researches as tests of their validity. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, here we go. I gotta... Okay, more blah, blah. Camden, 1844. This keeps cutting back to different sizes here. Sorry about that. Contents, negative part. Material used for building Egypt. Is that going to work? The Annals of Egypt and the Pentateuch. Use of animal food in Egypt. Winds of Egypt, cultivation of the vine, origin of civilization in Egypt, use of iron in Egypt. The positive part, history of Joseph. It kind of goes through all these different things, the dreams, the dress and ornaments, marriage of Joseph, famine, adjoining countries, divination of cups. It keeps flipping back. I'm sorry about that. References to the of the Pentateuch to the geographical features of Egypt, Goshen. Location of Pharaoh's treasure cities, history of Joseph, kings and priests, embalming lamentation, appendix chapter 2. Exodus chapters 1 to 7, Pharaoh, severity of Israelites, papyrus and bitumen in Egypt, daughter of Pharaoh, writing as practiced in Egypt, preparation of stone for inscriptions, bastinado, the shoterim of the Israelites, the same as the modern Sheikh el-Baled, duties of shoterim, the arrogance of pharaohs. Chapter 3, signs and wonders. With the natural in the plagues of Egypt, Moses' rod changed to a serpent. The first plague, water to blood. Second, frogs. Third, gnats, kikim. The fourth, flies. Fifth, animals. Sixth, boils. Seventh, tempest. Oh, brother, this keeps flipping back to these smaller pages. The ninth, locust. 10th, death of the firstborn. Chapter 4, Exodus 14 to 15, military force of the Egyptians, musical instruments among the Egyptians. Chapter 5, the materials and arts employed in the construction of the tabernacle and priests' garments, cultivation of the arts among the Egyptians and Israelites, the art of cutting and setting precious stones, the art of purifying, working metals, skill in carving wood, use of leather, spinning, weaving, embroidery, preparation of unguents. You know, I can already see already that with all this cultural, contextual, social, economic stuff, that the details of the Pentateuch are quite contemporary to that period. I guess I can put it that way. Law among the Egyptians and Israelites, stuff and color of priest garments, Urim and Thummim, cherubim and sphinxes, The figure and significance of the sphinxes, the cherubim, their form and import, Leviticus, Numbers, laws with reference to food, institution of holy women, Nazarites. Chapter 7, genealogical table, Genesis 10, Abraham and Sarah in Egypt, festival of the golden calf, prohibition of marriages between relatives, defilement with animals, Leviticus, Numbers, grass, Ha'ilah, Hasir, fish, cucumber, melons, of Tihim, onions, garlic. Wow. Diseases of Egypt are severe. Cultivation of the land in Egypt and Palestine. Kind treatment of Israelites by individual Egyptians. Deuteronomy, threshing with oxen. Montheo and the Hyksos in the appendix. Okay, we're back to this silly bigger page, smaller page. Is that going to work? Negative part, Egypt and the Book of Moses. It is incumbent on us in the negative part of our inquiry to disprove the pretended mistakes and inaccuracies of the author of the Pentateuch in relation to Egypt. By these, as has lately been asserted, he has betrayed that he lived out of Egypt and long after the time of Moses. Material used for the building in Egypt. The author, says von Bohlen, comes under the strong suspicion of having transferred to the valley of the Nile many things from Upper Asia, as the Egyptians were accustomed to build with hewn stone and the great buildings of brick. Exodus 1:14, instead of being Egyptian, seem rather to have been borrowed from the Babylonians. Ein Leitung zur Genesis von Bohlen. Peter was born in Wappel, 1796, of poor parents, and was left an orphan in 1811. In 1817, he was received into the gymnasium in Hamburg, where he turned his attention to Oriental studies. He was a pupil of Gesenius, Roediger, and Hoffmann in the University of Halle in 1821. And in 1822, he went to Bonn and attended upon the instructions of Freytag and Schlegel. In 1825, he was elected professor extraordinary of the Oriental languages at Königsberg and regular professor at the same place in 1830. He has since removed to Berlin. His work, so often referred to in this volume, is entitled Die Genesis historisch kritisch Erläutert, 1835. It was answered by Dreschler at Leipzig, 1837. The neological sentiments of the author may easily be inferred from the quotations and references made by Hengstenberg. Allusion is also made in this volume in one or two cases to his book on India. We can scarcely trust our own eyes when we read such things. It is possible that anyone who undertakes to comment on the Pentateuch and even ventures to accuse the author of ignorance in relation to Egyptian affairs can show himself grossly uninformed in these same things and makes assertions whose incorrectness is conclusively shown by the first compendium. In a case like the one before us, anyone who would first of all recourse to O. Müller's Archaeologia, there we read, building with brick was very common in Egypt. Private edifices, indeed, generally of this material. If we examine further, Herodotus mentions of a pyramid of brick, which is probably still standing. But we are literally overwhelmed with proofs of the abundant use of brick in Egypt when we turn to those who, during the present century, have explored the Egyptian monuments. Champollion, for example, speaks of a tomb built of crude brick at Sais and a temple of brick at Wadi Halfa. Rossellini says ruins of great brick buildings are found in all parts of Egypt. Walls of astonishing height and thickness are preserved to the present time, as for example the circumvallation of Sais, and also whole pyramids as those of Dashur, and a great number of the ruins of monuments, both great and small. Wilkinson says the use of crude brick baked in the sun was universal in Upper and Lower Egypt, both for public and private buildings, enclosures of gardens and granaries, sacred circuits encompassing the courts of temples, walls of fortifications in towns, dwelling houses and tombs. In short, all but the temples themselves were of crude brick. The same author shows that building with brick was practiced even in early times. It's got a footnote. Four built of brick are still in existence in Lower Egypt, two at Dashur and two at the entrance of Fayum. Several of smaller size also found in Thebes. And in the neighborhood of Memphis often bear the names of the monarchs who ruled Egypt in that early age. The Annals of Egypt and the Pentateuch. The author remarks verses Bolin further in the passage referred to supposes the existence of camels and asses in Egypt. The allegation is fully stated by him with the reasons is as follows. The narrator mentions the animals of his own native land, a part of which Abraham could not receive in Egypt. Genesis 45:23, 47:17, Exodus 9:3. He ascribes to him no horses which were native to Egypt, as the relator is indeed aware, Genesis 41:43. But on the other hand, he mentions sheep, which are found in the marshlands of Egypt as seldom as camels, and asses, which were especially odious to the Egyptians on the account of their color. Close quote. It is said the passage designated, and he, Pharaoh, treated Abraham well for her sake. And he had sheep and oxen and he-asses and men servants and maidservants and she-asses and camels. We inquire first why the horse is not among the presents. Even V. Bolin dares not assert that this circumstance is accounted for by supposing that the author did not know how abundant horses were in Egypt. In the enumeration of the animals of the Egyptians, horses stand first. The rearing of horses is considered in the Pentateuch as so peculiar to Egypt that in Deuteronomy 17:16 it is represented as possible that an Israelitish king, merely from love to the horse, might wish to lead back to the people of Egypt. If now the reason why horses are not mentioned cannot be found in the part of the giver, it must be found with the receiver. A footnote, as Hengstenberg has not given the precise dates here, it may be proper to add that arches were constructed of brick at least as early as 1540 BC, in the reign of Amunulf I, and probably in the time of Asurtisan, who is supposed by Wilkinson to have been a contemporary with Joseph. It is worthy of remark, says the same author, that more bricks bearing the name Thutmose III have been discovered than any other period. That horses were not in yet use among the Israelites, either in peace or war, at the time of Joshua and Judges. They were first commonly used in the time of the kings. But if the horse was not used by the Israelites at the time of Joshua and Judges, much less was it surely in the age of the Pentateuch, when the main object which the keeping of horses subserved in Egypt did not exist. If Now, this is the reason why the horse does not appear in the enumeration of the presents. It is entirely in favor of the true historical character and mosaic origin of the narration. If it owed its origin to the poetic tradition of the time of kings, horses would certainly have been mentioned, since we cannot suppose that the time of the introduction of them was accurately known, and still less that the fiction was so carefully managed for the sake of maintaining historical consistency. But we need not stop with merely the present passage. The Pentateuch and other places continually implies that in ancient times with which it is concerned, there were no horses among the patriarchs and their descendants. Moses, as Michaelis repeatedly describes to us the riches of the patriarchs as consisting of their herds, among which, while oxen, sheep, goats, camels, and asses are enumerated, we never find horses mentioned. The tabernacle was drawn by oxen in the desert, Numbers 7:3. That a great number of horses could not conveniently be kept in Egypt is implied in Deuteronomy 17:16. These facts, according to the modern views respecting the Pentateuch, are entirely inexplicable. They compel us to the assumption that the composition of the narrative precedes the time of the commencement of the kingdom, while at the same time attempts to refer the substance of the history in the book of Joshua to a later period. From the monuments, we learn that horses were used chiefly in war, especially for drawing chariots, in which the most distinguished Egyptians rode to battle. Solomon was the first ruler of the Hebrews who formed an efficient corps of cavalry, and he obtained most of his horses from Egypt, yes. As Abraham was a peaceful patriarch who avoided war even under circumstances of great provocation, a gift of animals rarely used at that period would have been every way unsuitable. The omission of the horse, then, instead of being an objection, is one of the strongest possible of undesigned confirmation of truth of the narrative. And here we will have to call it really quite something. Kind of stuff that never gets discussed. I never heard. I'm kind of half embarrassed here. But well. Fairer than the sun at morning was the star that told his birth. To the world its God announcing, seen in fleshly form on earth. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, to the Holy Ghost, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Godspeed.